There was an article that came out talking about glory kills and violence. Do these games make you a murderer, or are Doom's glory kills catching hate? Let's talk about that. So this whole thing came back from a PC Gamer article that came out called Do Glory Kills Need to Calm the Heck Down? They don't all need to be so violent that John Wick will spit his cornflakes out. Now, Doom, of course, is at the forefront with the picture here, and there's a whole number 1 section dedicated to it, but there's a lot of things people get wrong about it, and we'll talk about all that in a moment. It'll make sense. Just stick with me here. So I think this article is misunderstood, and I'll show you everything here in just a minute, but we have to take a look at Doom's glory kills popcorn horror aspect. Hugo has even said that they're meant to be just fun and silly, but also scary in a way. Not really scary, but if you look at the Pain Elemental glory kill or the Revenant, it's always that they have this expression on their face. They're, oh my goodness, what's happening to me? They're scared, but it is not something that is so hyper-realistic that you just fixate on this and it's kind of nasty. Before I talk about what other people have said about watching me play Doom and seeing these nasty glory kills, I just want to say thank you. This video is sponsored by S35 Gaming. S35 Gaming is an online entertainment brand covering the gaming industry and is sister to S35 Film and S35 TV, who cover the film and television industries respectively. S35 Gaming can be found on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so follow them for their daily breaking news or their videos that cover new releases, retrospectives, essays, and making of documentaries. Check the description for their Linktree link and follow the platform of your choice. Thanks again, S35 Gaming, and now back to the video. Now, I will say that I have been playing Doom, and people that aren't familiar with the genre or this type of game do see it and say it's pretty nasty, but I mean, hey, when you're stabbing at a cacodemon eyeball, it can't be too wholesome, right? Now, one thing we have to look at is that it is no doubt that they are extremely violent. Now, to argue against that would be incorrect, but being that you are killing demons, it is more palatable than people. It doesn't necessarily feel the same as Mortal Kombat's fatalities because those are just so brutal and they want to go anatomically to the next level than Doom does. You know, you do the glory kill and they pop and boom, they all disappear and then you forget about it till the next one 2.5 seconds later. Now, I will say too, if you have any sort of negative feelings while playing or if doing these glory kill animations do kind of bother you a little bit, I would advise don't play. Take a step back, be able to realize that, hey, I know this maybe isn't the best thing for me right now. Maybe my headspace just isn't going to work with this, so I'm going to take a step back, as it is a pretty integral part of the game. And if the violence of that bothers you, maybe some of the other violence in the game would as well. Now, I know that the majority of players are able to play and be okay, but like I said, if there is someone that it happens to bother, it's important to keep your mental health in check and do what you need to do. Now, it isn't reality, but still, it is. Look at the graphics of today, honestly. When Doom came out in the 90s, people thought it was realistic. Well, today, we're just getting more and more hyper-realistic, right? Now, I want to say that a game like many Doomers' favorite, The Last of Us 2, they go for a more realistic feel. I mean, when you think about the human sounds, the real emotion behind, like this is a person that you're stabbing, and you hear those sounds behind it as the knife goes in their chest, that is a whole lot different vibe and feel than Doom is. I mean, as you watch the screen and see all these glory kills, they are violent and they are brutal, but it's nothing like the Call of Duty No Russian mission, where you go through an airport and maliciously just slaughter tons of innocent people, if you want to. I mean, you don't have to. And I think the thing is, this game is rated mature, and Doom was one of the first games in the 90s to be rated mature. I mean, there is violence that is associated with it, and if you look back at the Columbine shootings, I actually covered that in my Dark Side of Doom's History video that you really need to watch. It's pretty much a whole documentary of Doom and where it came from. And if you look at it that way, that's one thing. Now, a lot of people would say, and studies shown, that just because you play a game that has guns and violence, that does not mean that you will actually be that type of person to go out and do that. You have to look at yourself. I mean, take a look, ask yourself, all of these hours that I've played, well, does this mean that I'm going to do that? We know it's not real. These are fake enemies. They are not human beings, which definitely does help. And to be able to just differentiate between fantasy and reality, what you do to blow off steam and have a little fun versus what you would do in the real world. And kind of echoing back to what I said about if it does bother you, don't do it. That's a personal decision that you have to make. And I know you have to really look at, like, there are kids playing Doom 13 and under, and that is a whole other issue. I did a whole video on should kids play Doom and the mature rating, But that's a whole other issue between you and your parents or your kids or whatever you're in. That's a whole other topic. But I do want to take a look at this article that people were talking about too in a little more depth and really see what they got wrong about it. Because when it first came out, people were like, oh my gosh, he says they suck. The glory kills are just awful and violent. It's Doom. What do you expect, man? But let's take a look at that and see what he really says. So when we actually go to read the article, it says that based on the completely arbitrary review system, he's decided that Doom's glory kills are mostly acceptable, well, because it's Doom and where it takes place, and it would be weird if it was, something like people instead of demons and evil things. There's a slim chance they have families and hobbies, aside from favorite hedgehog gifts, not gifs. See, nobody gives a witch's tit about how horribly they die. So what he's saying here is that it's like finding a chick in your breakfast egg. Horrible, but not entirely unexpected. A lot of people looked at the title of the article here and Doom at the forefront and said, oh, he hates Doom glory kills. And they did frame it in such a way that it would lead you to that assumption. But when you do read the article itself, it shows for Doom's section that they're okay, just of course a little brutal and twisted. But these other games like Wolfenstein, Call of Duty are mentioned too, and the ones that are more realistic are going to be the ones that get the more factor applied to them. So we have to ask the question, have people become desensitized to this stuff? I mean, if we look at the culture, like I mentioned back in the 90s, Doom was looked at as realistic, and graphics today make it even more so, and I wonder what's going to happen in 10 or 20 years. Now, we have to look at these being quick-time event style. Now, it's not like the player is drawing the sword across the enemy or manually stabbing them VR style. You press one button, and the game does it for you. Now, I think it's a little different than if we actually were enacting the process, going across the enemy, rather than one button that is a part of the gameplay flow and something that we get used to. Now, speaking of getting used to things, does this mean that we see this so much that we're desensitized to the violence? So what I mean by that is, when you have a repeated exposure to something, you begin to view it as, well, normal. Even if it's not normal, you get used to it and it's just not so bad anymore. Has that happened to you with glory kills? It's really interesting because we have a culture out today that is very horror movie obsessed, at least a subset of it is, and I'm wondering if we've just not gotten used to things. Remember back earlier in the video, I talked about people that don't actually play the game or even watch horror movies. They've watched me play whenever I've done Xbox, and they're like, oh man, that's nasty. You stabbed his eyeball out, or you ripped his arm off. Wow. So yes, I mean, they are violent, they are nasty, but you have to look at the purpose and the realism. I think we do get used to them, honestly, because when you really think about it, it's not as bad as some of the Mortal Kombat and things, but it is pretty rough. There's no way to argue against glory kills not being violent, because they are, but we see so much of them, we get used to them. We see the same ones over and over again. If you think about that, we see these same animations. Even when we see a new one, we've already had a bunch of them, so we're used to it by then. Be sure to check out the next video here. It's a Dark Side of Doom documentary that really talks about some of this stuff in detail. My name's Allstin. Thanks for watching.